My name is Jaseel Keloth. I'm 26 years old. I just graduated from an MBA a few months back. And I really have no idea how I ended up on this stage. So I got thinking and I realized that this is not the first time that I've been absolutely clueless. Let me explain. During my schooling, I did extremely well in biology, but I hated maths. And I ended up going to an IIT, where I nerded out on neuroscience, worked on cutting edge research at the MIT, but dropped a PhD opportunity there to work on big data at a bank. While at the same time, I sold myself on social media as an influencer. I never wanted to do an MBA, but the 6 close friends I had, all of them wrote CAT twice. Some made it. The others, including me, got into ISB. In between the raging pandemic, I started day trading and ended up writing daily financial news and other content for a stock market startup. After my MBA, I enrolled in flying school while slogging many hours away as a strategy consultant. Do I have a plan? Does it look like I have a plan? Absolutely not. And is there a method to this madness? I really don't think so. But there are some interesting lessons I've learned here. And I have a few short stories followed by the old school models or lessons. So let me walk you through it. You see, when I first cleared the IIT JEE, I only knew one other person who's gotten through this test, a senior from school. My family entirely consisted of medical professionals who didn't know about the IITs. All in all, I learned much later that the branch that I opted for, biomedical engineering, was something that was at the bottom of everyone's priority list. I didn't know that many IITians had to learn coding, irrespective of branch, to get those lucrative coding job offers. I realized these set paths way later in college. So I never did any coding during my time there. And I could not even apply to many of the on-campus internships or jobs because most of them had a coding test, which of course I couldn't qualify. In hindsight, this turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I was forced to look for such opportunities off campus through cold mailing. And by this time, I had a huge interest in neuroscience, and the best research opportunities were in the US. A lot of my batchmates and seniors have been to foreign universities, and I took their advice, but I noticed something. There wasn't any talk about applying to or getting into the meccas of science and engineering, the MITs and the Harvards of the world. I was curious, and they said, look, these colleges are never going to accept someone from IIT BHU. You might as well not even try. So from the very next day, I sent out over 500 plus emails to different professors across all these MITs and the Ivy League colleges. It's called cold emailing. I would call it probably spamming. But voila, among the hundreds of rejections that I got, there was a few interview invites, and somehow it all worked out. Of course, luck does play a big role in most achievements in life, but there are a few more lessons here. All of us, we live in a world of extreme analysis and charted journeys. There is no room for exploration. There is no room for self-discovery. Some tracks and journeys would be predefined as a success, and people who are on those paths are celebrated as successful, while those not on it consider themselves as a failure. But this can lead to tunnel vision, right? Where you kind of discard every other path that isn't the predefined successful one. I wouldn't have ever made it to MIT if I started to code in college. I never had any structured plan about how my journey should be and will be in and after college. And this enabled me to evaluate and try out all the paths that appeal to my interest without shunning them. And one of them kind of led to this extraordinary journey that I had, which I could have never, ever planned for in the first time. I'm sure you all get this question a lot. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? It's probably the best if you don't know. I also realized that just because everybody else, including people more experienced and wiser than you, tells you that something is impossible and cannot be done, does not mean it can't be done. Give it a shot, give it 2 shots, give it probably 500 shots. Chances are you'll crack it. So now, fast forwarding to 2018. Now, by this time, I had been to MIT twice. My supervisor there had helped me through the GRE prep, the essays, the admissions formalities, and so on for a PhD. And I get that magic email in the January of 2018. This was when I was doing my master's in neuroscience at Switzerland, but something felt odd. I wasn't bursting with happiness. there was a lot of doubt. I did not know what was going on. On one hand, there is a set path, right? A PhD, then you do a postdoc, then you move into the industry or you become a professor. It's rewarding, it's challenging, it's respectful. On the other hand, my side hustle in photography and travel was just at its tipping point. There was a lot of traction and action in India. I also had a job offer in data science, which was exploding at that moment. And it was a completely new field for me. My head, my logic, everything pointed me to do that PhD. But my gut told me to return back to India. This was one of the most complex, nerve-wracking decisions I had to take. And there were significant pros and cons to each one, right? But in the end, I went with my gut. I had some really tough conversations with my supervisor, my parents, my family. They said I was being stupid. Some of them considered it to be a betrayal. But yes, I was back in India. Now, see, if I had gone down on that PhD track, then I might have become a celebrated scientist with some path-breaking discoveries to my name, in the best case scenario, right? But then I may have lost out on photography, the data science, the India growth story, the travel, and the other things that followed. Do I have any regrets? Not at all. At the end of the day, go with your gut and don't ever think of the what ifs and the if thems and the buts and all of that, right? This second guessing will always show you a million other possibilities how your life could have been. But really, none of them matter because the only real one that exists is the one you chose. So stay convicted to it. There are really no correct or wrong decisions here. There are only decisions that you believe in and decisions you don't believe in. Now, the last story that I have, it's about how I started my drone photography. The year is 2016. I was in the US at this time. And as an intern, I was earning around $1,200 a month. Drones were relatively new back then. It was just getting into fame. And DJI had launched this new product called the Mavic Pro. And I've been excited about this product for quite a long time. I wanted to buy it. But it had a price tag of $1,000. It was probably way out of my budget compared to what I was earning on my stipend. But finally, I gave in and I bought the drone. My first flight was over the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It was scary, and I almost crashed it into the sea there. That would have been just $1,000 just going down the drain. And this was when I had barely $20 in my bank account. A month later, I did come back to India after my internship. And I realized that I was one of the 3-4 only people doing drone photography of Indian landscapes and Indian cities on Instagram. This is something MBAs would call first mover advantage. And I squeezed it really hard. I squeezed this first mover advantage to its limits. And I landed my first commercial client, which was a very small and upcoming startup at that time in the travel and hospitality sector called Zostel. I'm sure a lot of you would be aware of Zostel. I helped them with video content to launch their Coorg, Chikmagalur, and Ooty hill station properties in South India. Now, one thing led to another. I started building my network in this travel and photography industry. Traction started picking up on social media. My hundreds of followers became 10,000s of followers. A YouTube video that I created blew up and got 500,000 views. Soon after, I was approached by several brands, right? It had hit that critical mass. It was just a perpetual thing right now. And I had the pleasure to work with top brands such as Samsung, OnePlus, Panasonic, Sheraton, and many, many others. In 2020, I did a few shots for an Amazon Prime movie. And then the movie deal started coming. It was on a roll. Now, if we look back now, all of you would say that buying that drone was a no-brainer decision. It was worth every penny, every dollar that I could dump on it. But in 2016, in my place, I was extremely confused and blowing up what I needed to live in the US for a flying toy that I did not know how to use, that in one crash would completely vanish, would be a complete loss of my money. It was a very tough decision. So nowadays, when I see any opportunity, right, I grab it by its horns. It doesn't matter if it's challenging, expensive, vague, or beyond my skill set. As long as it doesn't destroy me physically, mentally, or financially, every opportunity is worth giving a shot, just like this TEDx talk opportunity. This is my first time doing a long 17-minute speech, and that too for an audience of India's brightest and best. And the worst that can happen is this probably flops massively and you guys joke about me for a day or two and move on. But if this works out well, then wow, I don't know what it could lead into, right? So what am I? Am I an engineer? Am I an MBA? Am I a consultant? Am I a photographer? What is my career, you might ask? How do I define myself? Careers, this is the stuff that we give our lives, our time and energy to. It becomes our identity. Scrolling back a few hundred years ago, a person's career was determined by their families and their preceding generations. Farmers raised farmers, goldsmiths raised goldsmiths. The freedom of individual choice didn't exist, and penalties were severe. In 18th century Europe, the sons of nobles were barred from becoming merchants and businessmen. It was impossible for the children of lawyers to become carpenters and artisans. But now, fast forwarding to the 20th century and the present, careers are determined and fixed by formal education and training through colleges and degrees. And until a decade or two ago, people used to work in a single organization for many, many years, even their entire lifetimes. Nowadays, that loyalty has kind of dropped. Job switches, function switches, industry switches are becoming mainstream and accepted. But what happens to your identity? Surely your identity can change every year, right? What I've realized is these single words that we associate ourselves to, an engineer, an artist, a doctor, a lawyer, these are limiting. In this era of free knowledge, we are just at the brink of uncovering true human potential. And multiple parallel careers is anything but just a start. Our generation is going to be filled with engineers who are also professional musicians, investment bankers who are also dancers, accountants who are also film directors. And all of us were asked in our childhood, what do you want to be when you grew up? Our previous generation only accepted singular answers, a pilot, a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, right? Or told us you can be anything that you wanted to be. But what if? But what if we tell our children, our youth, the next generation, that they can be everything they want to be? What if we tell ourselves that we can be everything that we wanted to be? That is the radical reframe that we want in our generations. Thank you, IIM Calcutta.